Hi folks, welcome back. This is the last video I'm going to record on chapter 13 on social psych, and I'll cover off two topics today, altruism and attraction. So what does it mean to be altruistic? Altruism is about helping other people without selfish intent. You're not helping somebody because they're going to pay you or they'll think you're a wonderful person and reciprocate. You're truly helping because you want to help. So this research, and if you look at that first PowerPoint by Latané and Darley, this research was inspired by a very famous murder in New York City. A lady called Kitty Genovese was murdered. She was on her way home from work in a bar in New York, in Manhattan, I think, and she was stabbed repeatedly, and this took place over the course of about 30 minutes. She was stabbed in a fairly public area, and the newspapers at the time the media reported that there were probably about 35 witnesses to her murder. And nobody helped. Nobody helped. So in the aftermath of this, inspired by this, I guess, Latané and Darley set out to conduct a number of experiments to investigate why nobody helped. So what they did in the laboratory was they created some kind of emergency. In one, they replicated this a number of ways. Sometimes the emergency was the room filling with smoke. Other times it was somebody in the room having a seizure. Okay, so the independent variable, what they introduced in their study, was some kind of emergency. And then the dependent variable, the thing they measured, was how likely were subjects to help. So what they varied, because they had a hypothesis about what might be going on here, why people didn't come to Kitty Genovese's assistance. They thought it might have something to do with the number of people that were around. So they devised a creative experiment in which they had three conditions. In each of the three conditions, the emergency took place. So let's say it was the room filling with smoke, okay? Imagine yourself a subject in this experiment, and if you're in condition one, you're in that room on your own. Okay, you're sitting in a chair, you know you're in an experiment. The experiment started, the experimenter has made some excuse about needing to leave the room, and you're sitting there and smoke starts to fill the room, right? For most of us, we go, oh my God, there's a fire, I need to do something. That's condition one. In condition two, or group two, you're a subject in the experiment, but there's two other people sitting around in that same room. They're actually not subjects, they're confederates, they're helpers, just like in the Solomon Asch conformity studies. So in that condition, if you're a subject, you're sitting in a room that's filling with smoke. There's two other people, confederates, and they're not doing anything. Condition number three, you're a subject, you're in a room, it's filling with smoke, there's five other people sitting there, they're confederates, they're not doing anything. So the dependent variable is, do you get up and help? So the experimenters, obviously the way they designed their study, they thought that a person's likelihood of helping had something to do with how many other people were around. And lo and behold, as you can see from that PowerPoint, the more people there were in the room, the less likely that subjects were to help. So with five other people in the room, only about 30% of subjects actually got up and said, excuse me, Mr. Experimenter or Mrs. Experimenter, there's smoke filling the room. I think we have an emergency here. The researchers called that diffusion of responsibility, or the bystander effect. And so if you think back to the Kitty Genovese murder, right, kind of makes sense. So maybe the reason people didn't help was because they just assumed one of the neighbors would help. 35 people, somebody's going to come to her attention. It doesn't need to be me. Pardon me, allergies. So on to the next overhead, when do we help? Well, we're more likely to help the person if they appear to need and deserve help. So in one of the more ingenious experiments, imagine you're in a lineup at Save On Foods, and there's a woman in front of you holding a young infant. And she's buying formula, obviously for the infant. The experimenters actually varied the situation. So in one case, subjects were behind a woman buying formula with a baby in her arms. And in the other scenario, they were behind a woman with a baby who was buying chocolate bars. And what they measured was how the woman got to the checkout with the baby, and she realized, oh my goodness, I don't have money. And she turned to the person behind her, or enough money, and asked for $1. And so the dependent measure, the measure in the study was, would the subject help? And what they found was subjects were more likely to help if the woman was buying formula. So if they perceived the woman to actually genuinely be in need of some help and to be deserving of help. Modeling, if you see somebody else helping. My mom is 92, lives in a condo a couple of miles away from where I live in White Rock. And there's been so much in the media about people volunteering to shop and assist seniors. A list went up a few days ago in her lobby, and some of the residents of her apartment building are aware there were a lot of old people in the building, and it was a sign-up sheet, and they were asking, the very, very senior people in the building to put their names on there, and they'd be happy to go shopping for them. If we have time, if we're time pressured, we're less likely to help. You're hauling to school to get to a class, and you're late, you're less likely to help. People in small towns are more likely to help. Fewer people around, you're more likely to have closer connections with those folks. And if we're in a good mood, I think that last one makes a lot of good common sense. Don't you just have more time for everybody in the world generally when you're in a good, positive mood? Okay, so I want to talk a bit about interpersonal attraction. Okay, so obviously I'm not going to share my personal observations on this. I'll continue to share my advice to you on how to attract a romantic partner based on research in social psychology. So we're going to talk about some of the key factors that predict the likelihood that we develop first a friendship and then a romantic relationship with somebody. So initial attraction or friendship is more likely to develop when proximity. What does that mean? Proximity means you have to be out there in order to attract somebody. If you're self-isolating, your chances of establishing a friendship even diminish. Now, okay, I should have mentioned something to you a bit earlier. This research is based on the assumption that we're talking about face-to-face attraction. Okay, certainly you can cultivate a relationship online, obviously. And this research is also based on heterosexual relationships. Okay, so just a caveat there at the beginning. So how do we develop a friendship? Well, just running into people. So we're more likely to develop a friendship with somebody we live next door to. We're more likely to develop a friendship with somebody we sit next to in Psych 1215. We're more likely to develop a friendship with somebody who plays on the same sports team. Just bumping into somebody who rides the bus at 8:30 every morning, we're more likely to cultivate a relationship because we have the opportunity to engage with them and learn about each other and maybe discover similarities. Yes, it can work in the opposite direction where you cringe when you see that person get on the bus at 8:30 who you see every morning because you realize they're a jerk. But generally, more often than not, those opportunities to engage with people build familiarity and it's called the mere exposure effect because just by virtue of the fact that you're exposed to them on a regular basis, you develop that relationship. Newsflash, goodness, attraction's most likely to develop when the other person is physically attractive. My goodness, I never would have guessed that. Males say they're more affected by appearance than women, but both genders are impacted by others' attractiveness. Okay, so guys are shallow enough. We go, yeah, yeah, attracted by physical attractiveness. It appears that women are just as impacted. Physical attractiveness affects our impressions of others' personalities. Attractive people are seen as healthier, happier, more successful, more socially skilled, more successful at work. They're perceived as earning more. Interesting. So we tend to, it's like social schemas that you'll see in another section of this chapter. We have this schema, social schema or category of physically attractive people, and we imbue them with all sorts of other positive qualities just by virtue of the fact of how they look. Now, there is a caveat here, okay? There is an exception. And if you're one of those people, I'm not, but if you're one of those people who is incredibly attractive, okay, then the best strategy you can use to attract other people is to make the occasional what's called social blunder. So attractiveness works to a point, but if you're incredibly drop-dead gorgeous, then people can be intimidated by that. So this is not something I've ever had to do, but making the occasional mistake, like spilling a cup of coffee or burping, or I don't know. The research that this is based on had a very attractive woman having a conversation with somebody in one condition, and in the other condition she had the same conversation, but she spilled a cup of coffee. And then what they measured was the likability of that very attractive woman. And in the condition where she spilled a cup of coffee, she was rated as more likable. Okie dokie. Matching hypothesis, we're attracted to people who are similar to us in attractiveness, similar to us in other ways too, right? In terms of our attitudes and values. So, you know, you've heard the expression, birds of a feather flock together. You've also heard, I'm sure, and you've experienced yourself, situations where opposites attract. Okay, so what social psychology is saying is, yes, obviously you have relationships with people who are very different, but the relationships that seem to last are ones where the two individuals have more common ground. So a nice segue into the last component, similarity. So we're more likely to build and continue to build that relationship if we're similar to the other people, as I mentioned before, in terms of attitudes and values. And this is a really interesting thought. Percolate on this. So if others are similar to us and agree with our opinions and attitudes, what does that do for us? Well, I think you can make the argument that that bolsters our self-confidence, because people are reinforcing what we think, and that's reinforcing in terms of our own view of ourselves. Similarities lead to shared activity. Sure, you know, you play tennis together, you go for walks together, you jog together, you go to the gym together. Oh my goodness, I still have this overhead in here. How to meet people and get them to like you. This was done a little tongue-in-cheek, okay? My purpose is to say, look, there are, you know, a few things that you can do. If you were uber manipulative, okay, and you didn't care about being genuine or authentic, then you'd be in humanistic psychotherapy hell. But anyway, if that were true of you, what you need to do to attract and maintain relationships is control proximity factors. So get your, in the words of my long deceased wee Scottish granny, get yourself out there, Ross, and circulate. Okay, so get yourself out there, put yourself in front of other people, create positive affect. Affect is emotion, so make people feel good, make people feel positive. Light a few candles, give a few compliments. Make the most of your appearance, right? So you guys have probably seen on Trailer Park Boys how when Ricky, really wants to make a positive impression on Lucy, he'll put on a new pair of track pants maybe, and wear a shirt that isn't too badly stained. Stress similarities and minimize differences. Now look, I'm not telling you to lie here, but you can explore similarities, notice them, and reinforce them, and that will lead the other person to like you more. All right, I'm going to wrap up at that stage. Stay tuned for a review session that'll probably be broken into 2 videos over the next few days. Check the homepage and Launchpad. There was an announcement recently from the college about extending the withdraw deadline for courses, including this course. Generally, check that COVID-19 update link on the Langara website. It contains some important information. Okay, take care, guys. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye-bye for now.